Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Let's get this thing rolling. 7:48. This is Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable. This is session 20 already, somehow, some way. We'll go over the ground rules. The ground rules are pretty straightforward. If you have anything to say, please do so in a polite and professional manner. You can do so by using the chat box down to the right-hand side or by unmuting yourself, so long as you're not going to use any profanities or name calling or anything that is warranted of being kicked out of here and never being allowed back in. We are recording it for the purposes of going back in time and recalling all of the wonderful information that we gather this evening, the good conversation, and the navigation of everything that is going on in the world today, as well as in our profession and in our scope of practice in the sports performance world. Will be recorded, uploaded to the YouTube channel, and for archive purposes, you will also have access for the CATA participants to CEUs based on this. Session 20 already, and I'm not sure how we got to this point, but I'm glad we got to this point. Lots of positives in these COVID times to take away, and one of those is this session tonight. Really looking forward to this one. Two guests. We have another little panel session. Really great guests from the York University Sport Performance team, and I will, if I can pull it up right here, just do their bios, let them say hello, and then we'll jump in. We got a lot of good stuff to get into tonight with them. So we have Sam Eyles-Frayne and Emerson Morassutti on this evening, and I'll just do this one at a time to start. So Sam Eyles-Frayne is the head strength and conditioning coach for the York University Lions varsity programs. Prior to York University, she worked as a strength and conditioning coach at the Canadian Sport Institute of Ontario, with a focus in working with Cycling Canada's track, sprint, and endurance athletes. She's assisted athletes in achieving 28 provincial medals, 21 national medals, 9 World Cup medals, and worked with 12 athletes who have attended the Olympic Games. In addition to working with Cycling Canada at CSIO, she assessed, designed, and implemented strength and conditioning programs for Ontario-based international level basketball, figure skating, synchronized swimming, and beach volleyball athletes. She spent 3 years at Sheridan College managing their multi-purpose strength and conditioning research center, and composed, implemented, and trained 8 of their varsity teams. She continues to teach part-time in their kinesiology and health promotion degree program. She has graduated from the University of Waterloo with a degree in kinesiology in 2011 and completed her master's in human health and nutritional sciences at the University of Guelph in 2012. She was an elite rugby player at both schools. She is also doing some work with the NSCA, which I'll get into when we speak with her. And then we'll move on to Emerson here, second and not second place, but just because I can't do 2 at a time. Emerson graduated from G.W. Williams Secondary School in Aurora, Ontario. He then opted to attend York University, enrolling in kinesiology and playing on the football team. He played from 2011 to 2016 and was named team captain 3 separate years. A knee injury in 2014 caused a red shirt in the 2015 season, and I think, if I'm not speaking out of turn, also heightened his interest in performance. His interest in performance began to come to fruition when he began as a student intern in the strength and conditioning department at York University in 2012. He worked and learned alongside one of our previous guests, Adam Douglas, in this role from 2012 to 2015. In 2014, he began work in the private sector with TPA, where he worked from 2014 to 2018. Emerson was hired at York University in the summer of 2018 and started officially in August. Starting in 2019, he became the lead strength coach for women's hockey and volleyball, as well as men's basketball. Sam and Emerson, thank you guys so much for being on as our guests this evening. I'll let you say hi. And I mean, the bios are great. I always love reading the bios and hearing about where everybody's come from and what they've done and that. But always a whole lot more depth to grab from the personal relationships. And Sam, we don't have much of a personal relationship. I think we've talked a couple times in the gym when I've stopped in post York time for me. Emerson, we certainly spent a lot of time together with the football program at York, and then following with the injury, and then since, we stayed in touch. So really look forward to this chat this evening and sort of strengthening, pardon the pun, don't really pardon it, the bonds here and the relationships and the network, and just trying to let some people into what's going on at that university and within the OUA. So I'll let you guys say hi, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks, James. Again, we don't have much of a personal relationship, but I would like to add that every single athlete that I work with at York that worked with you only say the best things. So super excited to be here, and you've had some awesome people on before. So just honored that you kind of wanted to have a chat, and interested for sure, as we'll get into, is the AT world and how we can always integrate S&C with AT. So excited. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Emerson.
Yeah. Hey guys, how's it going? And obviously thanks to James. And like you said, having a long fun to talk in kind of this formal manner, and being on the other side of these talks. I know I've been in a few of the guests are in here, so pretty excited.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you guys. And I was talking to a couple people that we have, I guess, mutual relationships with in the middle that know both of us on both sides, but don't necessarily know us all in one surrounding together. And really kind of cool, Emerson, from our end at least, to come full circle here and have this as a colleague talk now. And we had a lot of talks with the relationship as an athlete and practitioner role, and then the strength and conditioning side as you started doing some work down in the gym, and now full evolution, full circle. And you have another great mentor and colleague beside you at all times in that gym. So I think what a great facility and a great place for everybody to sort of get together and learn, athletes, coaches, everybody, for you guys to really platform the performance side. Before we get too far down the road of performance and all the things you're doing with the athletes there, both now and in what used to be called normal time. Let's jump into what you've been doing with these times. You guys found anything outside of S&C, outside of performance that's new for you? Anything innovative? We've started building a lot of Lego things that have never been built before. How about you guys? I'll let you guys take it away on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I have this I don't know how many people know this, but this really fascination with wood. So I have done a couple really neat projects in the past, like when wood barn doors were really in. I did a couple of those, and I've really been able to do a lot more, which has been super exciting. You always say, I just don't have time for that, and I got a little bit of time for that. So it's one of those things too. My husband's like, wow, it would really be nice if the deck was done like you wanted to 2 summers ago. And I'm like, I'm getting what you're putting down there. All right, I'm on it. So it's been I think there's been a lot of positives. You look at setbacks versus opportunities, and we discussed that a lot at York with our athletes. And I think from a personal side, there's been a lot of opportunities to reflect on a lot of things, and that also includes how we do what we would say the traditional strength and conditioning stuff. And I'm actually pretty excited what we've been able to learn throughout this. So if I could top it off, it'd be that. And then obviously in the climate that we're in, definitely doing a lot of education on a variety of other topics that are pretty pertinent in the media as it stands.
Yeah, absolutely. Emerson, how about you, man? I know you went through a move recently, so we're twinsies in that world as well. But what else have you been picking up? Anything new?
Yeah, well, the move, we just finishing getting all of our furniture delivered just now, and it was postponed like 3 months on us. So I think we're officially moved in after a month or so. But that's been fun, kind of switching locations and getting in a little bit of a different neighborhood. For those that didn't know, I kind of lived by York for a long time, about 8 years, being a student and then being an employee there. So kind of getting out of the neighborhood's been nice, but kind of besides that, like Sam said, is just taking time to do the stuff that I haven't been doing a lot of home cooking and taken interest in that. And then of course the professional development side, seeing all the opportunities for further education has been pretty cool. So trying to jump on that as much as possible too.
Yeah, awesome. And you guys both kind of touch on like some creative avenues. Sam, my first thought is like take the doors, lay them on their sides, and then turn them into the deck, and then invite Emerson over to cook dinner, and then everybody's happy and we're good. He gets to do the things that he's been doing, and you get to make the deck, and everybody's happy. And just stay 6 feet apart and wear the masks, and then like find a way to eat with the mask and do the things. But these are the things that we're taking, and like and turning lemons into lemonade is kind of it, right? Like this is all it's about right now. So you guys talk about like taking time to get a little bit creative, and we have to do that in all walks of life. I think for to a person that's been on here and the guests that have stayed on as well, like the attendees that are here in the room, some of them stay on after, and we just kind of talk, and a lot of it comes down to making this into an opportunity, and really reestablishing where your values lie, you know, and where you want to take things and how you can, and utilizing the little bit of extra time or the different time to do a little bit more or do something different. So really cool stuff. Appreciate you guys sharing a little bit of insight into your personal lives as well. We'll definitely get into the professional side. We won't go too far into the personal lives, I don't think. I just don't think that's a different kind of chat. That's not.
No one wants to hear any of that.
Yeah. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I don't know. There's some pretty good Legos over here that we could be talking about. And you talked about woodworking too. And I had a buddy. We just moved back, and so we were just pulling stuff out. And I had these 2 cornhole boards, and I posted them on Instagram.
Nice.
They were custom made by a buddy of mine who lives down in Florida. I used to stay with his mom, and she's sort of like a mom to me now too. But I used to stay with his mom every spring training. And he just one day, I think it was actually maybe for anyway, I forget what it might have been for a wedding, but anyway, he made these 2 cornhole boards and shellacked them and painted them the logo of the team that I was working for in
oh, that's wicked.
Yeah, in Michigan, and then the Blue Jays logo. And I think I took them into the Lansing locker room, and we used them in there for a while, like for that season while I was there. And yeah, pretty cool. So woodworking is awesome, and cooking, like no way, man. I'm just like I barbecued hot dogs today for our son, and that was pretty good for me. So yeah,
I'm gonna expect some pretty sweet lunches when we get back there, Merce.
Yeah, I'll cook the lunch and then you bake the muffin.
All right, I'll do the baking. I'm all right with that.
He's a killer baker.
This is it. So I
lo and behold, it's actually my husband that does all the baking.
This is it. The teamwork that makes it work, right? The teamwork that makes things tick. Having somebody that you can rely on to do, the things that you're either working on or the things that you don't have time for. This is what happens in the professional world as well. So a good little segue into the next and most important question of everybody's lives is the Tiger King question. So, have you watched Tiger King or no?
All of it.
All of it. Okay. All right. Merce?
Yeah, I got through it, but then I was on The Last Dance pretty heavy. So I think that kind of took over my recent memory.
All right. So two yeses, and that's a running tally that now puts the yeses way ahead. That's the biggest lead since Let's Chat started for all of you following.
I didn't want to. I really did not want to watch Tiger King. I think I watched the first 2 episodes. And my husband was like, this is literally the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
I'm just so intrigued. Like, and then we talked to talk about trying to relate to your athletes. That's all they're talking about is Tiger King. Like, that's all they want to talk about. And you're like, well, I better start watching, because if I want to keep up in conversation, I better have an idea of what's going on.
And you're not the first practitioner on here to say that. It makes sense. You got to be relatable. And as we get older, the athletes stay the same age in the university setting, at least. It's redundant athletes that are, anywhere from 17 to 24, 25, depending what hockey players are coming back from the OHL, et cetera. But, and we just keep getting older. So yeah, you got to stay up on these things. And I had Adam was on the other night, and he said, like, you got to move on, man. Tiger King's old news now. And I was like, I don't know. I haven't watched it yet, but The Last Dance, amazing stuff. Tiger King. I'm going to keep asking this one until Let's Chat finishes out, just to see like what, and then do a study on it, like some sort of publishable study about Tiger King and usefulness in society or something like this. So anyway, good stuff. Tiger King and the personal stuff. Again, appreciate you guys being on here, and for everybody who's in attendance this evening, we will get into some other things here shortly. Appreciate your time being here already at session 20 and working on the archive, so it'll get up there. This one will get up there. It had some glitches the other night, so if I glitch out here, just make sure you talk amongst yourselves and I'll come back in. Never once dropped the internet connection while we were in the Bahamas, which is like a regular thing in the Bahamas. And then the first time we were doing it here in Toronto, I had Dr. Zarnett on and it dropped out. And I was just like, well, what can you do? Anyway, nothing's predictable these days. So we just go with that. I had a buddy come by today, actually, just to say hi from the sidewalk, in case the government's listening. He did not come on our property, but he was biking. He bikes a lot, and he went out for a kayak. He kayaked from like downtown to the island, not a irregular thing. That's what he does. Have you guys found like there's a lot more people in your neighborhoods being a little bit more active than they were before? Or maybe this is just my eyes wanting to get off the property. I don't know.
Well, I'd say it's a little bit tough to say because most of the time I'm in the basement of York from like 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So it's a little bit tough to say if they're more busy during the day, but it was something that I had talked to Emerson about as well, in terms of, you know, is it going to like kind of equal out? Like, are people going to become more active because they're now consistently walking every day and that's kind of going to build into their actual routine? Or if you added up how much they walk now, as opposed to how much kind of constant walking they got in their day job, walking to their car and then walking to their office and then walking to the bathroom, like what's more, right? I don't know. But I did read on wearables, there was an interesting article that talked about how people are actually a lot more active now than they were last April and March, or March and April of last year. So maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It depends. Is the other go-to. If you ever struggle, just go to Stu McGill and use the it depends. It depends who you're asking. It depends what you're asking about. And it's always going to depend on some sort of variable that we can't predict. So it really does depend. I don't know. I just noticed, and I'm like thinking in my head, I was like, man, if there was ever a time that athletic therapy, and I know you're both, neither of you is an athletic therapist, but you're familiar with the profession. If there was ever anybody who was looking for work, like this is it. There's a ton of people out there just chronicitizing their bodies right now, like just overdoing things that they've never done before, and just like poor gait patterns. And I'm just like shouting from the porch, not literally, but I'm like, hey, you're in knee valgus. You're gonna end up with low back pain. Swing your left arm more. And you know, they don't get it, but they should get it. And these kinds of things. So anyway, I'm just I don't know. It's an interesting time, and I think you're right. Like wearable technology, we talked about a bit with Adam, who's in that, you know, very much in that field, in that research area. Baseball, because I spent some time in it, they started with wearables, and they were really looking at like that chronicity in terms of overuse injuries, but the mileage that guys and women on the female side were putting on their body outside of the actual baseball activity, you know, running on the field, running off the field, running around the bases, doing the things, walking to the toilet every inning and back, whatever the case may be. So some interesting stuff that'll probably come out of this. And I don't know, the seated posture stuff is always something to talk about as well. But let's jump into where you guys are at, and what's going on with your athletes and how you're programming in these times. And then I think for the most part, I want to get into like the model that you guys have in place at York, and how you're implementing that with the AT side of things, and how valuable, if there's any value to the integration with AT, what's worked in the past, these kinds of things that are very generic questions, but specific to your working relationship, both together and with the people that are at York. You know, Britt's on here, and some of the others. Yeah, she's in there hanging out. She looks like a lion again.
Hey, Sam.
She looks like a lion again. So so maybe let's start there. Actually, let's start with your individual career paths. And I read through the bio, but like, where were some standout, I guess, some markers in time in your career as to like, okay, this is how I got to where I am now. I'll start with Sam, and then Emerson, you'll be up right after.
All right. Well, I would say, like James mentioned, like most S&C coaches start off as being amateur, if not the best athletes, and then decide, well, I can't really go much with this, so what else am I going to do, right? So I'd say it definitely started with being an athlete, and I was put into some definitely precarious situations training, as most of the ATs on here know. When you're with provincial or national programs, you kind of get sent a program and then you kind of have to do it on your own. And that always obviously goes well with no guidance. And I ended up having some pretty significant injuries, which kind of sidelined my career. And one of the things I took away from it was I think this can definitely be done better. And I want to get to know a little bit more of this. I would say you asked a little bit about mentors in previous questions, and I ended up finding my way during my master's in this hole in the wall therapy spot called Basic Motion Therapy and Fitness, owned by Maria Morrison, who's an AT, who some of you guys might know, a very good friend of mine. And Trevor Cottrell was in the back, and this had like 3 machines, and then the rest was all platforms, and he was working with Wrestling Canada. And he probably took home $10 a month out of the time that he spent with them. And he just loved it. He has a PhD and 2 postdocs, and he's a full-time professor at Sheridan College, and was just like 5 nights a week hanging out with these guys and girls and not really getting paid and absolutely loving it. And I'm like, what is this? There's something here. So I spent a lot of time, free time, like for the younger people on here, probably a good 3 years not getting paid for anything. But I was just so enthralled in the interest of a passion that, you're just so interested in helping these athletes succeed in something, and you're just enjoy what you're doing. So I'd say that was the big highlight for me, where it started. And that was probably halfway through my master's. And for those of you unsure what you want to do when you're done school, I had no idea until I was done my master's that this was even an interest for me. So I would not be worried about that. Yeah, so I'd say that was one of my major highlights, and that kind of escalated. There was an opportunity at Sheridan where Trevor worked, and I think I was at the right place at the right time, and ended up kind of working there. And then did some courses there in the AT program as well, which was very enlightening to have an idea of kind of what education was going on that end. And then we built an integrated system between S&C and AT while I was there. And then my interest in kind of some provincial and national opportunities came up, which was really only given to me based on some of the mentors that I had. Like I said, it's kind of the people that in this industry, I would say, and they were kind of moving on from certain I was kind of given the opportunity to work with their athletes, so I thank them for that. And then CSIO opportunities came up there, and I ended up working with about 3 or 4 different programs, sometimes 5 different programs at one time. Going from, I lived in Etobicoke, I'd drive to Scarborough for 4 in the morning for synchro, and then drive to Milton with Ontario Cycling, and then I would drive to Downsview for 7 p.m. sessions in one day, and did that for about 2 years. So it was definitely a bit of a slog, and I speak to so many people out there I know on here, ATs, it's the same. Like everything is at night for sure for you guys, and weekends. And then got a really great opportunity to work with Cycling Canada full time under Brennan Murphy, which was a phenomenal mentor again. And definitely was out of my home more than I was in my home, and out of province more than I was in my home. And I'm sure James can definitely understand that. So I would probably say I was in my home or in the province maybe 3 months of the year. And yeah, I loved working with that level of athlete, but I couldn't do that anymore. So I had a huge interest in the internship stuff. I know we're not really supposed to use that word anymore, but the placement type stuff and the education, much like ATs kind of fighting for regulation and some sort of registered opportunity. Strength coaches are trying to do the same, as there's really no regulation at this moment, and we can talk about the CSCA a little bit later, but that was a big interest of mine in terms of how did I get where I am? No one could copy that because it just doesn't exist. So just trying to really try and find a pathway to help other people that are interested in being S&C coaches. And that really happens at institutions. So that was my big interest of coming to York, and it's definitely on the ground floor, but I think that's where we need to make the biggest difference and try and help mold some of that IST stuff as well at a younger, kind of younger part of your career, because most of the ISTs that I worked in at the provincial and national level was difficult in terms of kind of knowing how to work together and understanding that I don't believe that there's just one line. I think we need to kind of mold and work together in terms of what our abilities are, and the younger that you can learn that, I think the better off communication can be, and the better you can help your athletes moving forward. So yeah, long story short, that's kind of my path.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so insightful to hear people and all the things that they've done and when things sort of sparked in them. And you're completely right. As it's your own story, you can't be wrong. But everybody has their individual stories, and I think anybody listening, you find different avenues and you find different interests. And then I don't know. For me, I've always kind of since these chats have sort of evolved. It's about finding your why, and that's really what it's all about. It doesn't really matter how you get there or when you get there, but when you figure it out. Why you're doing what you're doing, you have a whole lot more passion and drive to help other people or in whatever area you're in. So really, really great answer. Obviously personal and in depth. Emerson, how about you, man? Jump in.
Yeah, so I think kind of like Sam said, it's so like interesting when we talk about our pathways. And one of the first things she said to me, like kind of when we started together, is how I got here, how you get here is going to be completely different. And it does look completely different. When I think back coming to university, my first goal was to be a physical education teacher. I thought that was kind of my goal in the long-term run. And that was just based off a gym teacher who had a big impact on me in high school. And enrolling in the kinesiology department was just kind of a guess, assuming that maybe that would kind of take me there one day. And it wasn't until my second year in the football team as I really started to kind of buy into the off-season program, looking for a job on campus that would kind of supplement the workouts that we'd be doing so I could stay in the summer. That was the one thing my mom said. She said, you got to get a job. You want to stay. I had a teammate, Jesse Merton, who obviously has passed away by now, but he was working downstairs with Adam, and he kind of turned me on to the job and said, look, man, like I work downstairs. It's a great job. And I'm just like, oh, I can get paid to work out now. Like, here we go. And we were kind of, bugged Adam for 3 or 4 months at the start of the year. And he finally submitted to me and he gave me the job starting in that summer. And again, it wasn't because I was necessarily interested in the field. I didn't know what the field was. I was just interested in training for football and getting paid and being with the guys. And that's kind of the start. And then from there, working with Adam and Dale at that time was really what turned my interest to it, and talking about performance and how that can relate back to myself as an athlete, and the reading with them that they kind of supplied me with that at that time was kind of the humble beginning of it. But like you said, it wasn't really till I kind of had my injury with my knee, and then working with you and kind of that rehab process with Adam, and discovering the injury side of performance and kind of sparking my interest more, and which kind of led me to look for more opportunities. Now becoming interested in the field of actually being a strength coach, I wanted an opportunity to go coach. And one of the big moments of my career was joining over with Jesse Cook at TPA. And the big reason was he let me coach. Again, like at the time when I was a student worker, I was more of a helper, a supervisor of the gym with kind of the limited responsibility on the coaching side. But when I kind of got under him, he's like, look, go coach this 12-year-old team. If you never coached a 12-year-old team before, that'll make you know if you like it or not really quick.
So really tough. Yeah, that one's sharks in the water with blood. They're chumming that water.
It's wild. Yeah, it's a different animal for sure. But I think out of all of that, the big thing I kind of took away is like, you see these young kids, and some kids are more talented than other kids are not as talented. But when they were with us, the kids who worked hard were the ones that got better. And you could see them, year 1, year 2, year 3, this improvement through the kids that kind of stuck to the program and bought into the coaching we were doing. And that kind of sold me on that idea. It's like, sometimes in sports, you got kids that are really good, you got kids that are not so good. But in strength conditioning and being a coach in this field, it's just like everyone's got an equal opportunity to kind of improve themselves as a person, as a whole. And that idea was pretty powerful for me at that time. So obviously I was with Jesse for 4 years, and it was an unbelievable experience, kind of worked my way up through him. And by the end of it up, and then I think it was maybe May or June, it's kind of just sitting in my basement after a day looking up, what the path I want to take. I know I want to become a collegiate strength conditioning coach. And Bart Zemanek hops on the phone and gives me a call, and he's like, "Hey, come apply for this assistant role." And I'm like instantly sold. Obviously, I didn't expect that to be on my pathway. And next thing you know, I ended up at York and was pretty excited for that opportunity. I mean, extremely excited. It was a huge moment for me to kind of come in under Adam. And then with a sudden shift, I was kind of found to be alone for a little bit. And then I think the blessing in disguise was that kind of Sam came around in the end. And, you know, I'd be lying to say if she's not one of the big mentors at this moment in my life, and kind of learning under her for this past 2 years has kind of taken me to a pretty good space. But kind of looking into the future and where I'm at now, I'm pretty happy with the situation at York and kind of just unfolding this part of it. So kind of early on in the career compared to Sam, she makes my resume seem very teeny tiny. Just teasing.
Paid Emerson to say that, obviously, you know.
Again, just being in this moment and this kind of chapter with it has been pretty exciting. So, you know, those are the kind of the names that stick out to me along the way. It was kind of pushed me in this direction and just keep going from here.
Yeah, and a really cool story, and you know, sometimes not to downplay what resumes are worth in the long run, but as you start out early in your career, a lot of things come down to timing, and investing in where you're at right now and not getting too far ahead of yourself really goes a long way. As is my MO with these chats, I try to send out a slide or a thought that I've read. And you guys both touched on it already, so I might as well just segue into the slide that I shared with you guys this week. Let me just pull this guy up here. And this was it right here. I was reading this week, and this is kind of what jumped out. And I sent this to you both, and your stories mimic this. You know, each of us is a completely unique creature, in that if we were ever to give any gift to the world, it would have to come out of our own experience and fulfillment of our own potentialities, not someone else's. And so we talk about this with your career path, but I also look at this from any number of different ways. You know, parenthood is new to me and to us, and this is very true for how we would like, you know, to raise a child, or all of the children in the world, is to be, you know, fulfill their own experiences and live their own life, and for us as well. And as we get older and as we navigate, this becomes more and more important, you know, and also in the performance world. So we can relate this to athletes. You know, there's one area that I've reflected a lot on, and it's looking at sort of like training and treating athletes in a team setting, and it's difficult to individualize things within those scenarios. So, like, do you guys have? Listen, I worked a lot of years in baseball, and there's a lot of programs not in the professional organization that I was with, but when I first started out, I was with a Can-Am team, and there's a lot of amateur programming out there that I was privy to. And I, for the life of me, when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and even now, I look through programming and I'm like, why are the outfielders doing the same thing as the shortstop, like, this is a baseball program, so every baseball player needs to do. And I get it. It's a time saver, and it's a bit of a, everybody needs to do this program and everyone will be better. And there's probably some foundational components to it, but that really floored me for quite a while, and still does, when I see programs that are generic to a team and not specific to the individual. All things considered, you guys have a lot of athletes. It's not that everybody needs an individualized program, but in terms of programming for athletes, are you guys, what teams are you working with? Let's start there. How many athletes do you program for? And then is there an element of this sort of individualization within each sport, either by position or for the athlete in front of you? Obviously, when injury comes in, we can talk about that. But let's start with the number of teams you guys train, oversee, coach, educate, all of the things, all the terms that we can use for what you guys do.
Yeah. So I just want to touch base on, just from that quote that you had, one thing that just I started thinking about that came to mind, and before I answer that question, is also the uniqueness of, like, I'm very proud of the stuff that we've done at York, but I can definitely say for sure that stuff wouldn't be possible without the uniqueness that the staff that we have bring. Like, there's no way, I think, that we would be able to have some of the success with some of the programs like women's hockey without the actual type of person that Emerson is. And the same goes for with our football program. We have another staff that's equal to Emerson. His name's Mike LaRock, and it's really the people that make it. And I think that's important to talk about, because it doesn't matter if my resume it looks great on paper versus someone else's. Like if the athletes and the coaches don't think that you care, then it's not going to matter. It's not going to work, right? So that really resonated with me when I saw that quote. And I think that it's important to say is that if I had someone else besides Emerson and Mike in those positions, I don't think that a lot of things that we've tried to accomplish would have been accomplished. So I'll finish up on that. But Emerson, you wanna talk about kind of who we service, what's going on?
Yeah, so I think as of now, I think we're at 7 teams, so including football, who receive kind of direct service from us. Obviously, there's interactions with all the sports at university, but the direct service would be football, the men's and women's basketball, men's and women's hockey. Men's hockey is kind of shared between us and Jesse. We kind of service through their space, and then men's and women's volleyball as well. So those are kind of the main teams that we interact with on I would say, a daily basis. And then additional to that would be field hockey, rugby, and kind of the soccer programs that fall in through our scope at different moments of the year. So I guess in total, I'm not sure if I were to put a number on it. I don't know, Sam, what do you think? 200 to 300 athletes on any given basis. That's for receiving programmings from myself, Sam, and Mike. But again, in terms of what you speak with, like the individualization, it just goes based on the team. And it's interesting at the university level where when we're not dealing with that professional athlete, like we're inheriting athletes that are quite young and underdeveloped. And then we have senior athletes that are very developed. So the range of programming that we can give obviously is very different. But then again, with the volume of athletes that we see, we want to obviously make a system that can suit us. So between the three of us, we can still provide adequate programming without, spending hours and hours and hours kind of going down that rabbit hole. So I think for at least my teams and the teams that I assist Sam in, minus football, we kind of divide them up into tiers, and it's based a lot on training competency, age, and then also development of skills, stuff like that. So for the teams that I know I work with directly, we kind of run 3 tiers. Tier 1 being the beginner, the intro, and that's pretty universal amongst all of our freshmen that are kind of on a very similar program, touch and go based on the sport and where that athlete's at, but the introduction year, and then there's kind of that middle program. And again, I think the big deficit that we see a lot is a lot of our athletes just lack strength, general strength, and building that has been a big priority, at least early on with our athletes. And then we have, I would say, a very special handful of athletes that are kind of evolved from that situation, and we're diving into some more exciting parts of the training and trying to develop some unique qualities with those athletes.
Yeah, a great insight. And Sam, not to downplay what you said either. Listen, I think the relationships and the personalities go much further. Everybody that we've had on here, to a person, regardless of resume or credentials professionally, has been somebody that's been influential in my life. And that's kind of the connecting, the web of this entire chat, is to connect those connections to other connections. So just keep using the word connection as many times as possible, and sort of just grow this web, try to just grow this web outward, and naturally have people having conversations that may not have happened in the past. And this is another opportunity based on these times, that everybody can sort of set aside a little bit of time and have conversation that may or may not have happened in the past. And if it had, then it can be done a little in this public sort of forum where we can relate a whole lot more to one another. When we can relate to one another in this field and as humanity, it makes for, it eases a lot of the angst in terms of how am I going to find somebody I can talk to, or how am I going to find a mentor, or how am I going to create a network of people that I can refer to, or and on and on and on and on and on. And through this, there's been so many people that have had spun off conversations with myself and with other people that have been on here as guests. Like, this is very much it. It's based on relationships. It's based on personalities. And you find that out quite quickly. I've been to a number of NSCA conferences. I've been to a number of CATA conferences. And ATC conferences, like in the US, and different personalities for different people. Like Vernon Griffith talks about his family like on a regular basis in NSCA conferences, and that one hit home with me on pretty deep. And then they go to another talk and listen and they're talking very much about like science and the science behind everything that they do, and you're like, wow, you're blown away. And so there's always different angles, and I think that's amazing that you have this support and that you value your staff and that you can do that openly. So that goes a long way for me, just in listening and seeing the rapport that you guys have. It's I'm sure the athletes feel that on a regular basis. As far as service goes, I'll thank you for the athletes that don't thank you. I'm sure many of them do, and for the staff at York as well. I'm sure they thank you on a regular basis. But for all the work that you do, there's sometimes those two words get left out. I've seen some of the Instagram stuff that your athletes have done for you through the season and through the year and stuff in terms of thank yous. But it goes a long way from the AT side too. So even though we're not working together, that relationship and the work and effort that you guys put in without any windows in your gym goes a long way. So make sure you surface as much as possible, get some daylight when you get back in that gym. And I think there's like I don't know, maybe there's an inversion plan in that building where like they're going to flip the training to upstairs and maybe the therapy room will move to the basement or something. Who knows? Or maybe it will all
let's
just
not
like,
do that.
yeah. Or just use that, it'd be really cool if they built just outside the AT clinic, that little roundabout. You guys just use that round and just
now
like,
you're thinking.
just domed it with a little bridge. And it could even be like I don't know, maybe it could be like one of those little pool things, and it could be like a rehab thing to get back and forth, like a running pool. Well, anyway.
Are there any donors on here? Is this
yeah. Anyway, but all the work that you guys do. So in terms of the number of athletes that you see, and the number of teams that you see, how do you block these in terms of training for groups? So football has obviously a large number of teams within the team: offense, defense, special teams, and then whoever else, kickers. They kind of end up on their own. And but then within the defense, the offense, and special teams, every athlete has to move a different way. They have to, like humans, they have to do things a little bit differently than the other person. So how does that look in terms of programming? I guess off season may be fairly similar, but in season, how does that look? How do you group athletes, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, so it's not easy sometimes. I'll say that much, but in season, if we look at our fall sports versus our full year sports, they need to be looked at differently for sure. Because essentially with your full year sports, you have 2 seasons within a season. And a lot of the times, even though I think we have great compliance, a lot of the times, a lot of good work doesn't really happen until they're really within you, right? When they see you, regardless of the off seasons where most of the work should be put in, it just doesn't happen. And we all know that we work harder when we're together. So for our full year sports, oftentimes our first semester is looked a lot more like a generalized type program that's further away from specialization. And as we kind of creep closer into the season or the more important games, or practice ends up taking a priority, and I'll say this with the preface that all the programs that we work with, our coaches are embedded very, very in depth in terms of our planning. So they're at the table 4 months before season starts, at the table like right after season ends. We're very integrated in terms of practice and the volume and intensity that we're trying to look for. And I know a lot of places can say that they do that, but that's one of the reasons why we try not to service 24 teams, because if you're actually going to be able to mirror some of those things together, you can't have one person working with 7 teams. It's just not possible, right? So our coaches are very much embedded in that process. So that's one part, is making sure that our coaches are on board and having those discussions. But I think there is this bit of an anomaly as well, or this misnomer that things have to look too different from each other. When Emerson made a great point, unfortunately, there's S&C coaches that are much wiser and have a lot more experience in terms of age than I would say one thing, that people just aren't as strong as they used to be, and that's true. Like anyone that's been around the block for 30-40 years, people used to be a lot stronger than they are now. So when we get them, a lot of the times they spend a lot more time in the athletic therapy clinic than we would like, because they can't handle the demands of their sport, right? So I think we try and push the strength portion further than most programs do in terms of generalization, I would say. And then in terms of individualization, I think it more comes down to timeline. So, or time on court or time on field, with the exception of probably specific overhead athletes. Obviously, kickers need to be trained a little bit differently than QBs in season. And that's just based on, obviously, those specific mechanics are overloaded in certain ways. So those are obviously a little bit more individualized. But it would mainly come down more to playing time in terms of trying to get them being able to be ready to go on game day. And if they didn't play, how are we going to use that time to our benefit to try and push some of the qualities that we were hoping to maximize at the end of the season? So yeah, with 300 athletes, that's really tough. And Emerson talked a bit about systems, and we work a lot with systems in terms of different tiers and understanding where we want our change direction stuff to go, whether it's basic and then goes more specific to sport. And I think it all comes down to understanding the needs analysis, which is the demands of the sport. So as some of the ATs on here that have worked with us, they know that within our facility, there's a needs analysis that's done for all programs, and they're encouraged for the team that they work with to read that so that they can fully understand the demand of the sport that the athletes are going through. And then obviously it educates you guys a little bit better in terms of potential risk of injury or what they should or should maybe not be doing. But long story short, yeah, it's difficult. And that's why, it's not just face-to-face hours with our athletes that are counted toward their job, right? It's probably like 15% is, or sometimes I think mine's a little bit shorter than Emerson's, but like 50% on the gym floor, and then there's a lot of work that goes in the back end. But definitely this ability that athletes need a base level for sure, and then depending on what that niche is or that need is, there's some specialty given to it. But at the end of the day, if the athlete isn't compliant and they're not in the gym as much as we want them to, then none of that matters. None of that matters. It all kind of goes out the window after that.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing, another thing that I've picked up over time, and definitely later in my career than at the beginning of my career, is you go to courses or you speak with people and you leave the conversation being like, I need to know what they do to make their athletes. It's not what they do to make their athletes. It's not what you do. It's not what Emerson does. It's not what I do. It's not what Kathy does. It's not what Britt does. It's how we relate it to the athlete so that the buy-in happens and the athlete does it for themselves and for their why. And that's what drives things forward for successful outcomes. I think I've just come to hunker down on that a whole lot more in these last couple reflective years of my career. Not that I'm in the twilight of it, I hope, but maybe, who knows, maybe I'm moving into some like new philosophy area or something, or like moving to Tibet or something. But anyway, these kinds of things. But I think just owning it as an athlete and creating that buy-in so that the athletes can take it upon themselves, and you don't have to, Sam, or you don't have to, Emerson, be the reason that everybody's successful. You're there as a support. You're there as a supplement that is warranted, not just because it's cool and marketed, but you're a warranted supplement for athletes and for athletics in order to enhance performance and in a legitimate manner. And you talk about the individualization, and you just went down so many avenues that I feel like we could sit and chat on for hours and hours. But the first one is kind of, that overtraining, I can't remember the terminology actually that you said, but anyway, they're overtraining for the capacity that they have as athletes. That was one noted, one point of emphasis in my analysis of athletes at York while I was there, is that you have such a varying degree of athlete that they come in, and then the time demands are astronomical in terms of their on-field time, what the requirements are in the varsity setting compared to what they were doing leading up to that, right? Whether it was through the summer before and it's a returning athlete, again, the compliancy issues that you talked about, or a new athlete coming in either from a different school or from high school. And then all of a sudden you look at like volume goes up, and as volume goes up, we know that fatigue goes up. As fatigue goes up, we know that power and all these other things. We can look at like force time velocity curves and all these kinds of things. But it's creating a base so that those athletes can sustain it. And I always wonder, And I started having this dialogue a little bit while I was at York, and certainly a little bit more now with some of the amateur level sports coaches that I've worked with, even in the Bahamas and things like that, where S&C and AT and the time on field they don't have to be 50-50, but there's a lot more entertaining of what is the value of all this time on the field if this stuff isn't valued, so a heightened value here with S&C and AT, or performance, like I'm using AT because that's the majority of people who are on here in my background, but it could be PT, it could be Cairo, it could be whoever, it doesn't really matter, but I'm saying the realm away from the ice, the field, etc., and the on-field time becoming a little bit more quality driven as opposed to quantity. Emerson, you lived it. I mean, you played football for York for a long time. There wasn't a lot of wins, but there was a lot of hours, on the field, and time in the gym. I think through periods of your career definitely started to have a heightened importance and value. And I think there was some buy-in stuff that it was sometimes really good, sometimes not so good. And then the compliancy issues and all the things. But without getting into specifics, would you say that there's at York and Emerson, maybe you could field this one to start. Would you say that there's some at least discussion and dialogue and openness from the coaching standpoint to the value of what you bring, and some discussion as to the number of hours for the sport on field versus off?
Yeah, I guess I can start off, and like Sam, I just want to reiterate, we have a pretty incredible group of sport coaches at York that we're very fortunate to work with. And again, being a newbie in this profession, I don't know any better, but I know based on my feedback from the colleagues that I have at other universities, that might not exist necessarily. So I think first and foremost, a good sports coach is truly the key. At least I found for myself being successful, and the coaches that I work with have been pretty incredible. I think coming from a sport like football, and Sam's got a glimpse of it, it's this much season and this much preparation. And the way I went about my off season as a football player was just, the off season gets me ready to go for 2 months hard, and then I rebuild myself. But now that I've kind of started to work with full year sports, the more I realized, like Sam said, I have more control in season than off season. And if I think about their development of an athlete, I would be a fool to try not to convince the coach to push these athletes in season to get better year after year. Like if you think about, if we're trying to improve a first year athlete to fourth year and they have an 8-month in season window, if we don't get something accomplished during that time, I think it's a waste of time necessarily. And I think a lot of our coaches really meet us in the middle with that and put the priority on, how do we get our athletes better over their 4-year career, not like, let's just win this weekend kind of thing. So again, through the graces of the coaches, we've gotten to a point, I think, where we can comment necessarily about the intensities of practice. I don't think we've broken through necessarily, at least with some of the sports I work with, about, except women's hockey with Dan, who was on here before, but about maybe critiquing the drills and stuff like that. But I think with Dan this year, we did some pretty cool stuff. And inspired by Sam about how we want to condition our players and the movements that we think we want to be doing in practice, and how that correlates back to the ice and their physical preparation. And we had a lot of success with it again. But Dan, having his hat at Team Canada for so long, he kind of understands the big picture of how this all revolves around. So I think to sum it up, it depends on the sport coach how much importance it is. But I think with the full year sports, the priority has to be, like you said, that 50-50, like, we're working to win, but we're also working to improve our athletes. I don't know, Sam, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. It really comes down to having a relationship with your sport coach, because you're really there to support them and be a voice for athletes. That's how I view it, is you're just trying to create what the sport coach wants in terms of their success, and kind of bring in some new nuances to do that. But if you don't have that sport coach on board in terms of understanding things like, not necessarily overtraining, but just this idea of, how much volume is necessary, how much intensity is necessary. Like, do you know that practice is a 7 out of 10? Or are athletes actually feeling like it's 9 out of 10, right? Like, are you reflecting on that? And like Emerson says, we have phenomenal sport coaches at York. I can't say that enough, that are very open and also coming to the table with those questions, which I don't know the demographic on here in terms of being able to have other conversations with other sport coaches, but I can definitely say for my provincial and national experience, that is not always the case. So it's definitely been a bit of a breath of fresh air working with them. And they gotta have the conversation, right? Because the reality is a lot of the times for us to most institutions to say that a worthwhile change occurred, all they have to look at is attendance.
Yeah.
If the like, that's the only KPI you actually have to look at, because if their attendance is low, that they won't improve. But if their attendance is high and it's consistently high, now we can actually do some cool things, because you're actually building a capacity, you're building a base year after year, and then that allows for some really cool conversation. But we've actually gotten to the point where, and this is super cool, where we're having discussions with coaches where, they want a completely different practice plan for their first years than any other player. And like, that's pretty cool, where you're saying, I value you 3 years from now. I need to make sure that, you're in the gym 4 times a week and only practicing 3 times a week. And your practice volume is at 70% of everyone else. And those are actual conversations happening, which is super exciting.
Yeah, so some really amazing answers, and obviously again coming back around to the relationships and coming back around to looking at things in terms of having the conversation. These are themes that are a common thread with everybody that we've had on and that I've spoken with on this, and then afterwards with people and beyond and throughout my career. Like, these are the things that go the longest way. It doesn't really matter reps and sets. At the end of the day, you can throw them out, and the relationships that you have are going to make for better athletes, for better humans, and for better whatever you're trying to achieve. And you bring up some really interesting stuff in terms of like the way you program and how you program and who you program for and your why. And it's almost the philosophy, and what I find in sports performance and in the practitioner realm and manual practitioner, there's a lot of stuff that's like really trendy, things that are like, I don't know, doing things with your shirt off upside down and then doing some other things. And then that gets 1 million views, but things that are really warranted in terms of, stand-up science, evidence-based practice, these kinds of things. And even these conversations that we're having right here, like, you're doing things based on your demographic, your environment, and your ability to be pliable with the people and the space and the time that you're working with. And I think for me, that is massive. Like, that is the bottom line. There is no cookie cutter approach, no matter how good the program, the coach, the resume, the et cetera, if it can't be pliable enough to fit in where and when and how it needs to in the setting, right? And there's not a lot of settings like yours, right? In the university setting, where you have coaches that are willing to have discussion, coaches that are willing to value what you do, what the clinic does, and you have the support of administration. So it's a really cool environment for anybody who has, I'm sure everybody's worked in and been around a varsity setting, I guess, going through school. But if you have the opportunity to go back and be in there and see some of the nuances, like, these conversations open a lot of eyes to, in terms of like, it's a really good setup. You have a lot of good framework and you have all the structures built. And then what happens within those walls is really what creates the outcomes on the other side. And you also touch on like athletes, and these athletes in university have like so much on their plates, right? And this is the other thing that took me so long to come, so stupid, but it took me so long and so simple and so basic, but it took me so long to actually open my eyes to, I left professional baseball and it was very like, just like narrow, and my blinders were on. Like, I need to be professional all the time. I need to be the longest hours. I need to be the hardest work. I need to be the most professional. Don't smile. Don't do this. Don't do that. Make sure like you're just a hard ASS as much as you can be. But you lose some of that. These student athletes have so much on the go. So how do you guys help in terms of balancing that? I know the mental health side of things is really coming to fruition at York and with some of the other institutions across Ontario and Canada, but how do you offset that? Like, during exam time, when you're programming, does your programming change during exam time? Like, is that a concentrated effort on your end? Just as an example.
Yeah, so I'm sure, Emerson, you've got some examples for sure, especially with women's hockey. Dan's done a phenomenal job in identifying. I mean, he was doing rate of perceived exertion and sleep hours decades before any of us there. So, Dan can do a pivot table better than anyone I know. So Of course, like the answer has to be of course, right? And our coaches do a really good job of understanding when their athletes' schedules are, but also there's some unique things that occur in like first year and third year in terms of, and it's at different at every program, but like these weird orientations that are apparently really high stress that I didn't have that when I was in school, like different things, and that causes extra stress more than exams sometimes. And understanding that stuff I think is really important, because at the end of the day, they're not getting paid, like you don't own them, right? And it's a little bit different than working at a pro setting or an Olympic setting where the athletes, that's their job, like that is their job. And one thing that I really learned this year that I'd never even considered was programming volume based on like what an athlete could actually afford to eat.
Yeah.
And like, that's why I like really like having these conversations, or I mean, from the little bit that I've known you, James, with you, is you talk about some really cool stuff. And one of the things is like, yeah, what really works in terms of theory of what I should be prescribing this athlete to be able to be better in terms of a strength phase. If I program that for that athlete, I will make that athlete worse, because they actually can't financially afford to even get 2,000 calories in a day. And like, that is a reality that we have to acknowledge and appreciate, that we can harp at them to eat breakfast before they get to the gym. The reality is they don't have money to actually, some of them, are just scrounging up enough dollars sometimes to catch the bus to come to school. So those discussions are extremely important and absolutely have to be had, because you just end up being, part of the problem, right? And like, there's programs that can be extremely successful and have been extremely successful without us, right? And like, that they can be successful without S&C coaches. So we got to understand what our role is, and how we're actually supposed to meant to assist and support. And that is something I had never considered. Not to say that I didn't experience it before, because naively I probably did, and I didn't consider it or program based around it, which I'm thankful to have that experience now, because it's definitely something that I think about when programming for. But that also, you talk about relationships, and to know that information truly about the athletes that you're working with, you have to have a very good relationship with them for that to be shared honestly, which is something, again, I'm thankful for the athletes that have shared that information with me so that I can adapt and help them with that.
Yeah, and Emerson, before you jump in here, I think that's huge. And I talked about that when I was at the university at York with students, and I talk about that on a regular basis when I'm talking to anybody about doing analysis, assessment, movement, whatever, screening, these kinds of things. It's knowing who's in front of you more than anything else that's going to go the extra mile in terms of, if you're looking for an outcome or a working diagnosis, like you're not going to, you may be able to get to that, but if you don't know who's in front of you and all the contributing factors, you're missing a whole lot. And that's the other side of it from an AT standpoint. You touched on earlier, I think before everybody came in the room, but I think it's incredibly valuable for AT students to be in the gym. And the reason for that is there's so much information that you gain from watching an athlete move and from watching an athlete just interact in the gym. And I don't mean necessarily socially, but interact with the bar, interact with the kettlebell, interact with the program. Are they engaged? Are they disengaged? Because that can also create some information in terms of, okay, if and when they get hurt or they need me, how much can I push this athlete? Are they the type that can just go down there and be on their own? Or are they the type that's always with Emerson talking about how they do a certain movement, or how do I do this, or I don't want to do this today, or these kinds of things. It just opens your eyes. And you talk about, knowing your athlete and how much they can eat. That's a massive one. And then we had Elena Luciani on, who was formerly at York and is now, and she talked about, she talked about going out with athletes she was at Ohio in her master's and her internship there. going out with athletes and grocery shopping with them, just to like, okay, you want to save some money or you want to shop properly, like that's a good use of time for anybody, you know, who's in the performance industry, in the health industry, in life as a human being. Like if there's a way that you can help people away from the field, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the gym. And I think, like you talk about relationships, it's very clear that you guys have a great relationship together, and I'm sure with the athletes as well. And that really is the foundation of humanity, I think, and definitely in the sports performance world. You also talked about maybe not being able to afford money for calories, and we won't go down the supplementation area right now, but sleep has become so very important, and to the point during this time they had a sleep symposium that was free. It was really cool. It had a lot of good speakers on it. I haven't gone back to see if they actually made it free afterwards, but anyway, and sleep is a thing that we worry about with our phones on a regular basis. Like if if the battery like even gets below 40, you start to worry, like, am I going to be able to make it into 9 o'clock tonight with my phone? But our athletes and ourselves sometimes don't check that very well. And Emerson, you're a more recent athlete, but like there's a lot of other priorities at nighttime sometimes in university, you know, that than getting sleep. Do you guys educate on that? Do you talk on that? Do you have somebody that you rely on for that information with your athletes?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the strength conditioning realm where we kind of get looped in with all these like little extra bits. Like we're the person that educates on this and this. And I think with an expanding team at York, there are people to have that conversation. But again, I think oftentimes we become the person that facilitates this with the coach, but as well with the athlete. We see all of the athletes all of the time. And I think our messaging is very vital to the athletics department as a whole, because we have a big dictation on, again, they trust us, they know that our opinion matters to them, and we can have a pretty big impact on that. I think it's interesting though, again, just relating it back sport to sport, like this year working with women's hockey, they had an incredible season. Working with Dan and just kind of following his lead, that group was motivated. Like they didn't need extra information. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew how they wanted to do it. And for me, it was kind of just, like I just checked in with the leaders, like, are we good? Are we good? Do you want to see this? Want to see that? So when you're relating it back to the consideration side of it, a team like that, they would just tell me straight up, this is what I want. This is what I want to see. And we would just do it. Again, it made my job pretty simple, but it was a pretty unique stance in the team where if you compare it to one of my other teams, the men's basketball, I have a group of guys that are pretty undereducated, I would say, in terms of performance. They're educated in slam dunking and shooting threes, and they're really good at that, but they don't know how to take care of themselves necessarily. So I would have quite regularly guys show up to the lift. It's 5 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon and say, hey, coach, I haven't eaten anything today. It's like, whoa, we're doing back squats and we're going 5 sets of 8 here. Like, what are we going to do? And again, just kind of taking a group like that, you have to meet them where they are. And in my mind, I'm writing down this program and it's going to be the sickest program of all time. And I'm ready to make these guys jacked out of their minds. And they haven't eaten breakfast or lunch. So again, and then just having to strip it back and come right back down to them. And again, Sam laughs at it now, but what I started doing with these guys is I just buy them snacks like Rice Krispie Squares and little things to supplement them with something before they started working out. So I guess it really depends on the group, the education and the tailoring that needs to be done. But I think the biggest thing is you got to meet them where they're at. If the group's not ready for what you want to say, you got to strip it back more and be patient. Again, like I remember last year when Sam allowed me to kind of work with men's basketball, I gave them a what I thought was a sweet presentation about all this information about sleep. And, maybe it was, I finished the presentation. I walk into the office. Sam's like, that was over their head, man. Like you got to pull that back and you got to kind of meet them where they're at. And I found in that moment very humbling is like, it's not going to happen right away with some of the athletes and just being persistent, but now kind of following them through a bit. We have some guys that are doing some pretty cool stuff now. So I guess it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, no, great talking points in terms of, everything that you talk about. And Rice Krispies treats are good anytime. So just have a backpack full of those and you'll be fine with every athlete, I think, at this point. It kind of brings me back to, I think I shared this story earlier on in session. I don't know, I can't remember what session it was, but John Berardi talked about that too, who's a big, performance nutrition. And he talked about going in with I think it was a bobsled team, but the U.S. bobsled team, who was like a world champion caliber team, and he had like all this advanced knowledge ready to present in terms of nutrition, and and he opens the door to the athletes, and 6 of them walk in like 5 minutes late holding bags of McDonald's, and he's like, well, all this advanced nutrition stuff, like when you strip all that stuff away, it's still just nutrition talk at the basic level for those that need it, you know, and you really have to play the audience, scan the audience, and know your audience. And again, it comes back to knowing who's in front of you, and needs analysis of the sport, human analysis of the individual that's in front of you, right? And you talk about so many things that are of such value, right? And I don't even think we need to talk about what exercise is best for every human to do, because I see that debate out there all the time. It's like, if there's one exercise that you need to do, you need to be able to deadlift. And I was like, well, you need to be able to deadlift if like deadlifting has any relevance in your life, versus, you know, versus, I don't know, being able to, I don't know, chin up on one finger or whatever Kathy's son is doing these days. But these are the kind of things that go a much longer distance. And I think these are the conversations that all of us need to hear and all of us need to have, right? There's no secret I mean, there's a lot of science, and there's a ton of research and effort that goes into the background. I'm not minimizing that. But I think that art side of things is very much at the forefront. And again, like, I think, in my own mind at least, and it's probably partway right but partway wrong, in these times that's really come to the forefront too. Like, you have to get creative and to have some cohesivity or some buy-in with your athletes during these times where everything's virtual. Like, it's not about like, get on your camera and do all the push-ups right now. It's not what it's about. It's about connecting and making sure that everybody is still getting the meals they need, the food they need, having the social interaction, and staying active enough that they're not going to, you know, walk onto the gym floor and blow out on day one kind of thing. So some really good stuff that you guys are sharing. If anybody has any questions for Sam and or Emerson, please feel free to type them in or unmute, and they'll be happy to answer for a couple more minutes here. It's getting on 9, so we're beyond an hour already. Time flies. I'm not sure how. It might just be me because I'm building Lego for the majority of the day. And then if you saw the latest Instagram post, it was isolation day 6 today. And we got the hose out and created a mud puddle in the backyard, and then nice. I had to pretend that I was going to the water park and the water wasn't running, so that I could be sprayed without knowing that the water was on. So that was fun, but that was good. And this is our time in quarantine, so this is what we're doing. So you guys program for athletes of every type and every kind and every position and virtually every sport. So the availability of information within yourself and resources that you go to on a regular basis to help with that. Is there anything right now that is maybe foundational in terms of a resource that you rely on to revert back to, a textbook, a website, another practitioner? I don't know, 1 or 2, it doesn't have to be 1, not to say that you're copying and pasting, but there's always some dependence on either philosophies that you align with or you know, thought processes that you align with. Is there any that come to mind right now that you could share, just for people to maybe pick up and breeze through or hunker down and go cover to cover with it?
Well, you talked about fads, James, and I think more and more as years go by, I rely on things that were done 40 years ago, to be honest. And there's definitely lots of books out there, but to the audience that's here, one of the things that I always really encourage ATs or any manual therapist for that matter to do, instead of reading, is to learn how to train. And I say that because, well, we encourage and we're building. They're definitely the ATs that I worked with on here. I know we're in the gym a couple times, so that's exciting, right? But you know, besides just showing up to the gym and watching the teams, right? Like working out with them, and you know, like I said, several of the ATs on here absolutely did that. And there's a big difference between what you can read in a book and what you can actually feel to be able to understand. You know, when an athlete comes to you with a sore back, you know, why is that back sore? And, you know, are you able to understand that they did a really heavy back back day a couple days ago, and they're just kind of at the end of their max strength phase, and that's actually a normal feeling, and not potentially giving information that is potentially concerning to the athlete, and just understanding that's a normal feeling. And there's a lot less manual therapists out there that train than there are that do train, and I think that will hold a lot more value in terms of learning what a 5x8 back squat is, or learning if you're not good at hinging, like teach yourself how to hinge, right? Or try to get a better understanding of how you can hinge to be able to then educate the demographic that you're going to work with how to hinge. So I kind of moved away from providing books for people to read, and really just encouraging that kind of experiential learning, and getting out there and learning what it feels like to do a single leg RDL pretty heavy versus a double leg, or what it feels like to maybe bottom out on a squat, and what kind of feelings could that exacerbate in you. And then if someone comes to you and you learn that they just did a max strength day the day before, you're like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of normal, or that's not normal. Like I've kind of experienced that. So that would be what I would share, is kind of going back to experiencing it a bit yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. Emerson, how about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, besides the obvious of just reading books and the profession, I think that what I've learned the most is just chopping it up when it's just me, Sam, and Mike shooting it in the basement, or like if we're sitting down with I think one thing that I've really enjoyed being a part of is kind of this development of like a bit of a IST between us and the therapies between Andrea, Britt, and Tracy, myself, Sam, and Mike. We meet quite regularly, and then in those meetings, that's where I kind of pick up on the most of my information about the return to play and starting forming those ideas. And it's just asking questions. Like I try to go into meetings, and although I might actually ask stupid questions sometimes, I just pretend like I don't know what's going on, and I try to ask and ask simple questions, and from that, gathering the information of people who know a lot more than me, and trying to piece it together for myself. So I think it's those conversations, especially like for the student athletic therapist. One thing that I definitely notice is that when they come into the room, they're tentative to ask questions that they might not feel are brilliant questions, right? Like come in and they say, you got any questions about this and that, and they're hesitant, but you can ask, why are they doing this movement? What is that movement to you guys? And why are we squatting? Like, what is a squat and why, kind of thing. And picking up on those little kind of informational cues from everyone around you, you just kind of piece together your own little bit of an opinion. And I've just anecdotally, I think I've learned more from that than I ever have from many of the books that I've done. And then I think the second thing for myself is just trying stuff and screwing it up. And then you kind of figure it out too from there, is when you go through that trial and error process of you make your whole session and you walk into it, and this isn't going smooth like you thought it would, and that trial and error I think has been quite powerful for me too, of just realizing what I like, what I not like. And especially being a young coach, I think from that perspective, it's going to mess up sometimes, and then I bring it back to Sam, we kind of chop it up a bit, and I put together a new idea and we kind of try it again. And yeah, I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah, and both of you talk, a little bit about humility, or there is some humility in your answers, and I think that goes a long way as well. Making mistakes has been massive in terms of my career, and in terms of everybody who's been on here. Is the ability to fail is critical to grow, and how you bounce back from quote unquote failure. Like it's not even failure anymore, because it becomes success in the end, because you learn from it. So some really good talking points. And Emerson, you talk about walking into a room and pretending like you don't know what's going on. That's a whole lot better than walking into a room pretending like you know everything that's going on. And I'm being honest, because I've been in those meetings too, not necessarily at York, but in my career. And I've been that person who, I know what's going to happen in this meeting. I don't really need to pay attention, or whatever the case may be. And you walk out with the same, either, I don't want to say resentment, but you're just not getting anything out of it when you go in with an attitude like you've got it all figured out. And I think in this field, more than ever before in my career, admitting that you know very little, that we know very little about the human, performance model. There are some foundational components and principles to live by, certainly, but there is so much movement and so much synergistic occurrences within systems of the body that there's nothing predictable about it, really, when it comes down to it. The only thing that we can predict is showing up. Again, exactly what you guys have talked about this entire night is stripping it down to what's in front of you, and being pliable enough to and ego free enough to do exactly what's needed in the moment and for the season and for that athlete. So great talking points for sure across the board, and experiential learning is bar none. It needs to happen. And do you guys take anybody on who is not a York student in terms of coming down to the gym and observing, or I don't know, interning might not be the right word, but like coming in to observe and learn from you guys? Or is that in a regular, let's not say regular, in a non-COVID time, would that be potential for anybody who's on here that might have interest in doing so?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have some core work studies that are York specific, and then those are the only ones we're allowed to pay. Yeah, we have a couple Sheridan students and then Guelph Humber students as well. And when I was working at Sheridan, we used to take on Chiro students, or those, or any sort of manual therapist actually. That was not just a student, but had already had also was certified if they were interested in kind of coming in and shadowing. And absolutely, like I said, one of the main reasons why I came back to an institutional setting is that big ST piece, and trying to integrate as many people as possible to kind of get a better understanding of what's going on both sides. And we're always trying to encourage our AT students to come down there as well, and providing base programs if they need it, you know, jumping on their teams programs if they need it, and the more the merrier, really.
Yeah, great stuff. And you talked about, you know, the AT students, and as Emerson knows, and Sam, you probably heard, like that was a big thing with Adam and I there, to try and get the AT students down there and not miss that component, because you miss so much in terms of all the things that we've talked about already, as well as like you create even more buy-in from the athlete, or more rapport with the athlete, and that you're watching them do more than just be on the field, you know, and there's a whole lot more action, I think, for every athlete, not standing around as much when you're in the gym as opposed to the sideline. So it's a cool environment, and sweat equity is another, you know, catchy term that goes a long way when we work out and sweat together and we're all sort of rowing in the same direction. It builds rapport, it builds sense of community and belonging for everybody. So even if you're uncomfortable getting under a bar or on top of a bar or whatever the case may be, trying it out and just learning what it feels like. I've talked about this at nauseum to students. It's like you're instructing people to do things, but you can't even demonstrate them. So that's no longer a good thing for that athlete, and it's certainly not for you, because you're questioning yourself the whole time. So if I have somebody doing I don't know, some sort of heel drop activity on a best board because they sprained their shoulder, like, you show them how to do it. But if you can't do it, or you don't have a reason for why they're doing it, you're losing them already. So the gym becomes the performance center becomes a massive knowledge center for ATs. And I encourage virtually every AT to do their NSCA, at least challenge the exam. And if not, do an internship or talk with strength and conditioning coaches on a regular basis. Because through my career, early and current, the progressive end of things always had a higher ceiling, in my biased opinion, from the NSCA, the CSCS, the strength and conditioning coaches, than AT. That's not necessarily the case, but my bias always felt that way. And reactionary medicine is not medicine. It's just a Band-Aid solution. So getting ahead of the curve in terms of understanding what's going on in the gym and off the field, as well as on the field, you get a whole lot more out of that when somebody comes in and lies down on the table, or asks you for some tips on the sideline or whatever. So really good stuff, really informative. If anybody has any questions, we're pushing this thing a little late, and I think
James, I just want to anecdote on that one, and I think I would be a failure if I did not mention our time together and my rehab process with you. But I think what you said there, like, kind of struck me, is when you're extending yourself in these other spaces, the impact you have. And for those of you guys, I guess Britt was really the only one around when I hurt my knee in my 4th year of university, and James was kind of the go-to guy for me, and I kind of fell under his wing. And through that rehab process, I think the big thing for me was he was the guy taking me to the pool. He was the guy who took me down to the gym. He was the guy that took me outside. He was with me that whole time. And I think as an athlete, the biggest thing is like, it made me believe kind of it. I knew it mattered to me because it mattered to him. And I could tell it mattered to him because he was with me here, he was with me there, he's extending himself in all these different places. And I think when the athlete sees you, regardless if you feel that you're worthy in that space or you're adding any value to that space, they know in their mind, even subconsciously, that it matters to you and that now your opinion matters so much more to them. And I think a big impact from James on my life was kind of that, and just extending himself in the way he did for me. Just made me believe. I was like, we got this. I know, even in that kind of dark time, being slightly delusional about my return, being like, I'm coming back in 4 months. Like, I don't even care because I know this guy's got my back. And it was a powerful moment for sure.
Yeah, and that's a two-way street. I appreciate the sentiment, and you know, that's a two-way street with the athletes as well. You know, and that was one thing that when I left York and stepped away, sort of from like the practitioner side of things, professionally at least, in terms of title. That's one thing that I really missed. You know, because you guys have such deep impact in terms of our lives, and the way that I look back on the relationships and how you carried yourself on the field, off the field, in the gym, in the clinic, good days, bad days, all those things. Like, it goes such a long way. And I think a large part of this turnaround, or this awakening, I guess, for me, is looking back on those times and the impact that all of the athletes have. It's definitely a reciprocal thing, and you feed off of one another and you build each other up. And as a practitioner, I always want to do my best for who's in front of me, and the why becomes that athlete, and the why is easy to answer when it's somebody who's going to do the same thing in return, and it becomes a team effort. And Sam, you've touched on it. Emerson, you've touched on it. This is an integrated model for you guys that takes a lot of moving parts. It's not flawless, it's not perfect, but it's evolving, and it's constantly based on discussion, relationship, honesty, hard discussions, evidence-based practice, and you know, putting in the time and the effort at the front end, because that's where it matters the most. And out the back end is, you know, not a large percentage of athletes are going to end up athletes for their life. I mean, in terms of the sport they're playing, they'll be athletic and they'll remain active, but they're not going to be pro athletes, the majority of them, but they take so much out of the care that you provide and the things that you provide in terms of education. So I'll thank you on their behalf and on our behalf as ATs, again, for being on here tonight and taking the time out from your lives and all that you guys are doing during this time. Really appreciate it. If anybody has anything, I'll call last call here. This has been Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable, session 20. I'll hang out for a few minutes once we stop recording, but if there's anything for Sam or Emerson, please feel free now. We'll give that about 30 seconds if anybody's got anything, and then hop off of here and thank everybody else for attending tonight. Keep spreading the word on this. These chats go a long way in terms of our profession and building out this integrated model. And the discussion moving forward. I know I always see Sasha on here, who's the head athletic trainer down in the University of Bahamas, and she's an amazing human being. She's on here as a guest as well, and I think I'd like to connect. Maybe you guys could connect. I'll figure out a way that we can connect with her, because she doesn't have a strength and conditioning department down there. And she had some good questions for me while I was down there. And then when Steve was on a couple weeks ago, might just be worth a discussion and a connection. And we've talked about some international things that might be possible in the future too. So anyway,
if women's basketball ever goes back down to the Bahamas, I'm hoping they take their S&C coach with them.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. That was a great trip for us. Yeah, that great trip for us to have them down there.
Yeah.
Too. You know, it's amazing. So, and Sasha, I know I'm speaking out of turn because you're not saying it, but I think this might be something where some of the performance staff in a varsity setting, maybe that conversation can start up, and you guys can figure out where to go take it at UB, because that's a great institution with a lot of athletes and a hardworking ATC staff and a great athletic director and a whole bunch of things there. So who knows, conversations start things and then things roll into other things. So this has been great. All right, so nothing rolling in here. A bunch of thank yous, obviously. Emerson, Sam, thank you guys so much for your time this evening. It's been great. This has been Let's Chat, session 20. And everybody else, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hit end recording in 3, 2, 1, and... Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.